Watch this. No way!
Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Cookie Jar Golf Podcast. I am Tom Mills and today I'm joined by Bruce Fitzpatrick.
Good day. Or good evening.
And Sir Sam Williams.
How are we doing, gentlemen? Ages since we've podded together. Absolutely bloody ages.
Yeah, it has been a while.
Well, we were going to get together, weren't we, last week and do a little podcast, but your house move, Tom, and by the way, if you want to hear more about Tom's house move, spoiler alert for the Church Stretton Course Diaries podcast coming up very soon. But obviously, sandwiched between Raw North Devon and you going to Spain as well, Bruce, it's been a little bit hectic on the golfing front. Silly season is here.
We've been getting out, playing a bit. It's a wonderful time of year to play golf, isn't it? As the sort of, I mean, are we strictly in autumn? Probably summer, I guess.
I think we're edging into autumn
shocking,
now.
But yeah, we're edging into autumn, and
It certainly feels like autumn.
busy period.
How was Spain?
Spain was very good fun. Thanks. Yeah, played a little bit of golf in the south of Spain, so that was enjoyable. We need to do a Course Diaries podcast, which will be inbound shortly on Raw North Devon. Of course, we don't want to overlook that. The cradle of English golf, much to dissect and discuss there.
Yeah, very good. And I did spot you posted a little picture of yourself in Spain, Bruce, and then the DMs were alight, and obviously I'm man-marking the social media. People asking me, was it Las Brisas? I had absolutely no idea, so I just ignored the messages.
Yeah, that was the course played on Saturday. Yeah.
That's
played,
in Rob McGurk's Eclectic 18. What's it like?
Oh, which hole is in Rob McGurk's?
That's a really good question.
Wasn't it the 18th?
No, definitely wasn't the 18th. I'll tell you right now.
It might be the 12th. Should be the 12th.
Look at it. He's just got it to hand. You know, you can just pull it up. He's such a consummate professional with all these things. He's like, I'll tell you now, no problem at all.
Well, the great thing is, you know, I put them in the chat in the episode notes. It's the 8th. I thought it was around 7 or 8. It's the 8th.
Yeah. Risk and reward par 5, classic sort of heroic golf hole with water in front of the green, much like the 12th there. I think there is actually something to be said about golf in the Mediterranean region, because, I mean, friend of the pod, Malcolm Duck, called it sort of gin and tonic golf. Yeah. And I think, you know, by and large, yeah, I don't know if that really captures it. I think there's a lot of heroic golf out there. There's quite, you know how sad and obsessive Harry and I can be about, you know, playing off back tees and playing with slope rating and seeing, you know, how difficult the courses are out there. And actually,
you don't like
slope rating on a lot of,
do you, Bruce?
the courses out there are, yeah, very, very highly rated on slope, because there is just so much water and there's so much architecture in the kind of mold of heroic golf, really. I don't know. For me personally, I don't think many of the courses out there have the same kind of charm and architectural appeal as a lot of courses in the United Kingdom. But that's not to say they're not great and good fun to play on their own merit. I just think that, yeah, there's maybe less variety, yeah, in Spanish and Portuguese golf. But I would be happy to be proven wrong there. If anyone's got any recommendations of some great courses to go out and play, we were fortunate enough to play for a couple of days at Valderrama, which I think is a really quite unique course. That's probably quite different to, you know, the mold that I mentioned just there, because that is much more sort of tree line. Obviously the infamous cork trees, small greens, not an overabundance of water there makes it slightly different. But yeah, I mean, you've played a little bit of golf out in Portugal, haven't you, Sam? And Tom, you've played there too. I'd seem to remember.
Yeah, I'd agree. It's a little bit kind of similar brand throughout, isn't it? I mean, there'll be some little. The problem is you tend to fly into these big kind of resort / destinations, don't you? So that's where they tend to stick the kind of more, you know, newly built courses, water sodden, like you say, a little bit longer, championship tests. I dare say if you really went off the beaten track in Spain, and, you know, I'd love to get out and play Pedrena. I'd love to go and see some of the charming places that sit up in the hillsides and stuff, because they've got to be there in abundance. But anyway, that's not the reason we're here, gentlemen.
No.
We want to do a little recap on the goings on in the world of golf. Lord knows there's plenty of it at the moment. I don't even know how we start to kind of get our way through this, but it feels like so much. There's obviously the whole thing around Liv. We've just come off the back of the DJ's inaugural Liv victory. Which, to be honest with you, I don't think they couldn't have bought a better finale to the event if they'd tried, and it seemed to pass without kind of too much note. I don't know if you noticed, but DJ winning with an eagle on the first playoff hole was just absolutely. I mean, it's arguably great TV. If that was PGA Tour, that would have been one of the highlights of the season. It's actually kind of passed without too much affair. Have you noticed?
Yeah, and this is definitely a theme we need to pick up on, and maybe it's not worth going down the rabbit hole now, but it seems like mainstream golf media outlets have made a stand in terms of not, particularly on the usual suspects in terms of social media channels, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. They're not giving it anywhere near as much oxygen as they used to. It's like
no,
one little post, DJ's won 4.5 million, and that's it.
It's remarkable, isn't it? Whereas, and the thing is, it is the biggest story in the game right now. There's no getting away from it. Liv, the developments in the PGA Tour, it's the biggest story. But it's almost like it's become like an embargoed topic. Have you noticed?
Yeah.
Like the only way you can talk
hardened Twitterverse that just, I wouldn't watch Liv if my life depended on it. And it's so, people are so worked up on, the source of the funds and whether or not it's ethical to watch it and if the players are sold out. But I think the mainstream media have died off a little bit in terms of how aggressive they've been towards it. Although you've got a few that are still really trying to bang the drum against it. And then you've got a whole bunch of people that are, I think, as it progresses, I mean, it doesn't appear like it's getting tons of views. Like the views on the YouTube live aren't phenomenal, but like, I don't really know how that compares to the PGA Tour.
70,000 views. It's not phenomenal. It's abject. I mean, like, just by any measure, that's just terrible, really. 70,000 views on YouTube.
I mean, I'm not digging watching it. I haven't been watching it being like, edge of the seat stuff. And I don't know why. It's not because the tournament, because of the tournament. It's not because I have any particular views against it. There is some sort of atmosphere when Matt Wolff slam dunked his tee shot on the par 3 and had, they're all howling like wolves. It was all a bit, bizarre. There is some atmosphere, but like, I cannot explain why, but I just can't watch it for more than 20 minutes without being bored.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. That's the weirdest thing with this, isn't it? I've kind of criticized the first couple of events because it has just been like exhibition golf. It's like there's nothing to see. You're watching them kind of meander around for 3 rounds. I think the broadcast is like littered with this sort of backslapping culture about, welcome to Live, as soon as someone hits it within 10 feet of the flag, which is a bit nauseating. But the tournaments haven't delivered. You could argue, though, last weekend it really did deliver and it was a great tournament. But like you say, no one really got up for it. It's a really strange one. But obviously that's coming off the back of a huge amount of player announcements.
Yeah.
I think that's worth us talking through in a little bit. Obviously the players that came across, I think, maybe some of the ones that didn't come. Yeah. So let's kind of walk it back.
So let's walk it back to, I think we've not really covered it in great detail since the 150th Open. That concluded on the 17th of July. I think it's fair to say we were aware on the ground that there were murmurings, and indeed it was brought up in Cam Smith's post-championship presser that he was going to go to Live the following day, which he obviously didn't. And then that was subsequently amended to say, well, there's murmurings that he wants to play in the FedEx Cup playoffs. He might want to play President's Cup. A lot of speculation, but it felt like the 150th Open was a bit of a turning point because you had Martin Slumbers, chief executive of the R&A, coming out and giving quite a sort of well-articulated, passionate defense of the sort of status quo, along with Tiger as well, who for ages had remained pretty quiet on the topic. But gave probably his longest and most considered denouncement of Live and the format, what it stood for, what it meant for younger players. And since then, it's just kind of picked up pace, really. It felt like the 150th Open was like, the battle cry, really. And since then, it's just gotten more and more acrimonious between the two sides.
Yeah, and like the PGA Tour just kind of, reflecting on the last few weeks of almost, rather than do anything to build bridges towards, because what you've now got this situation is where the international players are fleeing en masse, heading out to go and play this, kind of a strip backs, kind of series of commitments, different events, going into Live, right? It's not really that attractive to the vast majority of the PGA players. Okay, you've got people like Patrick Reeder going, etc. But by and large, it's more attractive to international golfers. And then you've got the PGA Tour that seems to have gone the opposite direction and basically just gone, yeah, I'm going to double down on this. I'm going to make this almost an exclusively PGA Tour kind of US brand. They've done everything they can, I would say, to not kind of play to the stuff that Liv are looking at beyond kind of increasing purses. All these elevated events, Monaghan's come out and said, don't think the Scottish he's basically refused to confirm whether the Scottish will be one of those elevated events. It kind of looks like it's just going to be used to alternate across the different...
I thought Monaghan had come out and confirmed the Scottish. I thought the Scottish was confirmed.
I think he said it'll alternate. So I think, there's obviously this commitment to, is it 20 elevated purses throughout the year? Or 12 elevated purses?
Well, that was interesting in and of itself. Did you hear John Rahm's comments on this?
No.
So Rahm was like spitting feathers about it because he found out during an interview with him as he was like in a presser, and they were like, "Oh, so you got to play 20 events, and you've committed to that." And he was like, "Well, I haven't committed to it. Have I got to?" They're like, "Yeah, you've got to. It's the whatever it works out as, the 4 majors, the players, and 14 other whatever." But then obviously the Europeans that are still on the PGA Tour, like Rory, Rahm, Fitzpatrick, Hovland, Hatton, Lowry, they've still got to play a certain amount for the DP World Tour to qualify for the Ryder Cup. So they will suddenly have a fixture list which is like almost
it's never going to save them any golf, is it? It's not going to. I don't think any of this is going to actually result in significantly less golf for these players.
No, he wasn't talking about it saving them any golf, but he was like, I can't physically commit to that many because I've got to go and play the DP World Tour as well, because I've got to get my Ryder Cup status. So he was suggesting that something, or basically he was suggesting you need to go after Rory because Rory will give you the answer, but whether the DP World Tour qualification process will have to change, so they don't have to go qualify in Europe with the DP World Tour, or whether they won't have to commit to the 20 events in the PGA. But obviously it's all so fresh, like they're just 90% winging it, really.
Well, yeah, but I think the DP Ryder Cup requirement that needs to be, that'll be ironed out later. I feel the 20 event minimum is the story here, because for many years, or the 15 tournament requirement on the PGA Tour was the sort of yardstick, as it were, and whenever Liv came along and said, well, we're only going to require our players to play in 14, that was the refrain of the defenders of the PGA Tour as well. It was only a 15 event requirement. That's now been boosted to 20, but you have this weird sort of bifurcation almost, with 12 of those 20 events being elevated events, and that's Century Tournament of Champions, the Genesis, Arnold Palmer, there's WGC, Dell Match Play, I think the Memorial's one, the BMW Tour Championship again. I mean, that's just sort of by the by, there's not really much change there. In essence, they're just kind of formalizing that the events which people already consider to be the most important are in fact going to be the most important, and compensated that way financially. But this requirement that they're going to get the top players together at those events is the key difference, I think, because they're saying that Well, again, I'm not even sure it's that
different. But they're doing it through
PIP
rankings, aren't they? Yeah, but the thing is, they're doing it through PIP rankings. So, I mean, this is the strange thing with it. Is it has become, there's always been this discussion that the PGA Tour is meritocratic. You get into a field on a Monday through Q School or whatever. You turn up to Monday qualifier. You can find yourself in the event on Thursday. You make the cut. You can go home with some money. Now these elevated events are going to be closed off. They're going to be really ring fence for the elite players. Those elite players are going to be determined by media mentions, Google search, all those kind of things, how much they resonate with the fan base. So all the ones that aren't within that elevated kind of, aren't elevated events as such, where they're playing for $20 million, stuff like the Shriners, whatever, they're going to be, I hate to say it, but they're also ran events. They kind of are already, like, which events are going to be worth tuning in for, but it's a really strange one. You've almost prohibited a large number of players there from playing in any of these elevated events.
Sorry, the PIP thing, just to clarify though, I'm not sure the players are getting into these events on the basis of PIP rankings. I think that
20
is
will be. So 20 there'll be 20 spots. Yeah. So 20 spots will be ring fenced for this sort of elevated series where they will be essentially mandated to play in 13 of the elevated events and 3 others of their choosing.
Because someone like Fowler, he's the example of someone who engages quite highly on the PIP, but because he's ranked outside the top 100 in the world, question marks as to whether he'd only get into those events for which he is actually eligible based on world ranking.
Yeah, that's correct. So
it's not a free pass.
No, but
I wouldn't dive into the facts on this, because I think the facts are out there. People can go out and find them, if they want to find them. What do you think about all this? What do you think about the fact that the PGA Tour and Jay Monahan has reacted the way that he has? Do you think it's the right thing to do? Do you think he's just basically knee-jerking the whole thing? What do you think?
Well, I think it's had to happen, but you've summed it up there, Tom. Like, it's reactive. It's totally reactive and doesn't seem particularly fresh or original. Who knows? I mean, time will tell as to whether it's they're positive changes. But no one could be saying the PGA Tour should be winning prizes for originality and creative thinking. The greatest kind of signal to me is that all those stories about why the PGA Tour couldn't expand and increase prize funds and increase some of the incentives and stuff like the PIP, for example, all that just seems to be complete bollocks because they've done it overnight, and I think that's the real concern. They just found it. They've literally just found it as soon as there was a threat. And the idea that all that money is just locked out of the game, I mean, until Live Golf came along, doesn't seem to me to be a particularly satisfactory answer. So, I mean, that's the story I think needs to be told, is like, why is it that Jay Monahan's been raking in somewhere between $7 and $14 million for the last, 5 years or since he's been commissioner? That's, widely estimated to be. I mean, in fact, some of it's publicly available information, so it's not estimated, it's fact. But in and around, the range of $7 million to $14 million, he's probably the most highly paid commissioner in American sports based on the actual revenue which the PGA Tour generates. I mean, he kind of outweighs NBA and NFL, MLB equivalent.
I'd love to see the statistics. I bet you Jay Monahan earns more than the average PGA wage.
Yeah,
I'd wager.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I mean, what's the average take home on PGA Tour for your average carded player? It'd be sub $3 million, would be my guess.
But that's not the story, is it? Because again, he's creating value for all the players. So I don't think.
But is he creating value though? That's the argument, isn't it? Like, I don't think he has been adding value.
I mean, I wonder what sort of. I'd be really interested to just see how that whole conversation had flowed, seeing these events at Live unfold, and just then seeing him go, we're going to have to find like $200 million here out of nowhere, guys. No problems. We've got it. It's in a contingency fund, which is how I think people like Davis Love III have kind of spun it and said, look, we've got these reserves. We've been very prudent, and now's the time to deploy the heavy artillery. begs the question, if that is true, then they've got maybe 1 year, maybe 2 at best, to kind of hope that sticks and then, stops the leaky bucket. Otherwise, there's a danger that, because if that is the case, it's unsustainable. And if it is sustainable, then, there's
what they've been doing all this time.
Yeah, exactly what they've been doing that money, because, I'm guessing they're not taking the money out of all the charitable stuff that the money goes into. I'm guessing those haven't gone to zero overnight just to increase the purses.
Did you hear the Phil Mickelson burn the other day? It was brilliant. He was on an interview with Liv, and he was like, I just think Liv is. I mean, he was on his Liv rhetoric as he does. He's like, I just think Liv is just great for the game. It's just changing the game in every way, and it's really good that players are now earning more money on the PGA Tour. It's really good that they've magically found $200 million. Carried it literally just dropped it in, like how they magically found 200 million and carried on without even breaking sweat. It was like so good.
It's sad that Mickelson's really the big casualty in all this.
Well, hang on. I'm not sure casualty is necessarily the right word there, because he's not conducted himself in the most upstanding way. I think it's a shame.
But he wouldn't be alone in that, would he? He wouldn't be alone in that.
Well, yeah, but I think he was a ringleader, wasn't he? Ultimately, and this is where I feel really conflicted, actually, because I don't feel enamoured at all with Liv and the people who've gone over there. And I remember, go back to 150th Open, the rumours that Smith was going to go to Liv imminently. It was just like, oh, champion golfer of the year, he's going to Liv. This all just feels a bit fake, and like this is the oldest and most treasured trophy in our sport, and it's just like, it's not. Surely is that not going to resonate with the number 2 player in the world as he was then enough to stop him going over to just an event or a tour that just is driven above all, and I still believe this to be the case, driven above all by kind of greed and money. So I do feel pretty miffed about the way things have gone, and I don't feel that comfortable with supporting Liv. But at the same time, it's like the PGA Tour just seems to have been so incompetent.
It's not helping itself.
Again, just like the impression I think we all get is that players have been pleading with Monahan and others at the PGA Tour to reform it for a number of years, and they've not listened. And so it's just like, the lesser of 2 evils almost at this point. I think it's crazy.
I think it's interesting how the governing bodies have almost stepped back from it a little bit as well. So, there was quite a bit of pressure on, if you remember, quite early doors for them to sort of come out and say, well, your major exemptions are gone. So, you can't join Liv and then turn up at the majors. They've abstained pretty heavily on that. Also strange how DP World Tour has remained fairly, with all the strategic alliance nonsense. They've kind of abstained from a little bit of that, I think.
Who, DP World Tour?
A little bit. Do you not?
Well, no, they're clear on their argument. Live players cannot play in their events. The only thing that's preventing that from being enforced at the moment is that there are ongoing court appeals, and they had a very different outcome in the interim sort of judgment to what the PGA Tour had. So
yeah, they've been a bit aggressive on the BMW stuff, haven't they? It's going to start obviously this week on Thursday. Well, Thursday for them, because they've been told categorically not to play in the Pro-Am on Wednesday, and that they won't feature in any of the featured groups that's going to be televised on Sky and everywhere else in the world.
It's mental.
I mean, they think, like, the weirdest part about this is like there's no getting around this now. The Live, at the moment they went across, the Live World rankings are quite strong now. They're much stronger than DP World Tour in terms of like their top 20 and what they can get out there. And the Live guys are having to go and play on the Asian Tour just to try and get some world rankings. And the reality is that I'm not sure how long they can continue to be ignored if you've got people like Cam Smith, DJ, Koepka, DeChambeau that are playing on the Live Tour. I don't think the sport can afford for these people just to disappear off the map and not be in majors. Like OWGR, I know Peter Dawson's involved with that, running that now, and I'm sure they're scratching their heads all over the show about what they're going to do, but you just can't ignore those players.
I think the
And it
problem
hasn't
is,
ended yet. The more players are going to go.
but I think fundamentally there's a problem now, which is how do we know who the best players in the world are because they're not playing against one another? That's the fundamental issue that I don't see how the official World Golf Ranking can be expected to solve it, because if you're saying that Cameron Smith and Dustin Johnson are not going to meet Scotty Scheffler and Rory McIlroy apart from 4 events per year, well, how can you do a World Golf Ranking on the basis of those 4 events? And, how can you do a World Golf Ranking and say, well, Cameron Smith went over to live ranked number 4 in the world? That should adjust the strength of field accordingly, because, all players go through peaks and troughs. DJ was not the player when he moved over to live that he was 2 years ago when he was winning every single FedEx Cup event by 50 shots. Like, when he went on that run and won the FedEx Cup by a country mile, won the Masters comfortably as well, and then has a massive sort of decline in form relative to those earlier standards the following year. It's just, that is the insurmountable problem, I think, for the official World Golf Ranking, is you are not going to have the best players playing against one another.
But I think that makes it even more important that they do play together 4 times a year, because it's almost like a calibration. That is how they calibrate. They play against each other 4 times a year, and they work out, okay, well, this person finished above that person, so
can you imagine
kind of reset? Go again.
Can you imagine if that was the case with 4 events? Like, the rankings would be nuts. Like, you'd have guys that have come through qualifying in the US Open that would be all of a sudden catapulted into, kind of exempt status. But I mean, look, there is no getting away from it. Henny Duplessis, first live event at Centurion, he finished second, didn't he, from memory or something like that? Yeah. The whole makeup of those events has changed. That performance is significantly stronger in today's live world than it was several weeks ago. So there has to be something that accounts for that strength of field and the relative loss of the strength of the field in other areas. And it can't be the fact that they play these kind of 14 events with live and then disappear off and grind away on the Asian tour for a few weeks, and that's going to keep them into the world top 50. It's just not going to be possible. Also, their rankings are plummeting. So, it's creating headroom and probably some false rankings for players, further down the pecking order that are playing principally in the US. It's really hard.
This is why this was brought in, though. It was brought in as a metric to try and work out who the best players in the world are. And a key assumption there is that those players are going to play against one another. To use your common refrain, Nils, the danger with the 4 majors being the yardstick is that it's too small a sample size.
Yeah, but they're not going to have any more. That 4 is the maximum they're ever going to have, isn't it? Unless they start doing something, which amalgamates the tours, but they're never going to get any more than 4, and it doesn't even look like they're going to get 4. I don't.
Well, those are the murmurings now, aren't they? Bubba Watson and Phil have obviously been asked about whether they anticipate they'll be going to Augusta next year. I mean, all eyes are on Augusta National, really. They're the ones who are going to probably set the tone for what the majors decide. How
much of the PGA Tour do you think hangs on Rory's shoulders now? Because
the whole thing,
when you take Rory away from PGA Tour and you look at what's left, the makeup of the players is not vastly different to the kind of the top 40 playing live, right? Like, it's not massively different in terms of names, brands, impact. You got really big brands in their own right, like DJ DeChambeau playing live. Rory's, I feel like, the glue at the moment. Now, he's a generational player, but Rory's not going to be winning tour championships in 5-6 years time, would be my guess.
Oh, hang on, mate. I wouldn't write him off that quickly.
I don't know. But to be fair, mate, he's been at the absolute top end of the game for a long time. Like, he's a generational player, isn't he?
Yeah, he's 33.
He can't hang on to that forever, can he? Like, that's just a fact of life. My question is
5-6 years.
Okay, maybe that's a touch rash, but at some point, someone's going to have to step into that void. Rory's an enormous brand.
Do you think Rory is as vehemently against live as he makes out?
Yeah, I think so. I think when it gets to the point that you're saying that much stuff in public to, with the intensity that he's been saying. I mean, there was a clip posted online, excerpt from his Tour Championship press conference where he talked about how he really wasn't going to be looking forward to seeing those 12 players from Liv coming over and playing the BMW at Wentworth this coming week. And he's like, I'm going to find that really difficult to stomach, actually. Just went above and beyond the kind of classic answer that a journalist is probably looking for in that moment. I think he's just been, he's never indulged the Saudi stuff. Never, even when it was Saudi International on the European Tour, just didn't indulge it. Didn't want to go and play it. I think he's.
Do you think a lot of this is driven by his position on the PGA Tour, and in his capacity as
he's too big to go? Yeah, he's too big to go, and it's the same with Hideki, isn't it? It's like there's a few players that almost transcend that ability to hop over and take a deal like that, because they're almost, they are too big to do it. It's like there's too much power in their hands.
What do you mean?
Well, I suppose I think it's quite obvious that Rory is in a compromised position where he physically couldn't take an offer, even if it was 10 figures from Liv. He couldn't take that. He couldn't take that deal.
But why? I'm not sure. I'm not quite clear on why do you think that's the case?
Because it would be because
Mickelson's a generational player. Like, Mickelson is the best player of the last 30 years, bar one man.
I don't think Mickelson is the same spokesman for the sport that maybe Rory is. The same could be said. Tiger, moves the needle, bigger than the game, transcends it all. We've heard all the superlatives. Same again applies to Tiger. Far East, Hideki's got a huge amount on his shoulder with the game as well there. It's almost like they're just too, I don't know how best to say it, other than the fact that I just think they're almost too big to make that kind of huge call.
Do you think Rory's aggression against Liv and the fact he's so against it is to do with the Saudi regime and where the money has come from, or do you think it's purely a fact of it's a split? It's basically dismantling the PGA Tour.
I think it's the latter, for sure.
I've never heard him say anything about the money. I don't think about the Saudi money and the amount of money. I don't think I've really heard him say a huge amount.
I wouldn't be so quick to write that off. I wouldn't be so quick to write off his moral issues that he has with it. By all accounts, not that I've really spent any appreciable time with him whatsoever, but by all accounts, he's a sort of deeply conscientious and nice person to kind of speak with and interact with. He obviously, there's a fair amount of evidence out there to suggest like he does genuinely enjoy kind of like reading and discussing politics. He's big into his sort of Stoic philosophy as well. He's a big fan of like Ryan Holiday's work. He's invested in Whoop and self-care. He's a fairly deep thinker, I think, as well about just various issues. There's pictures of him having breakfast with Bill Clinton and all sorts of stuff. I think he's probably quite a well-read person. And he enjoys taking on that role of being spokesman for the game. And, I think he just really conducts himself well. I honestly do. And I think, he'd feel a huge amount of disloyalty if he was just to abandon the tour that gave him a huge platform and allowed him to succeed to the point that he's at now. I think that would just really, be quite jarring in its own right. But also there's definitely implications there about the source of the money, the fact that it's funded by the Public Investment Fund of Saudi Arabia. And I don't think he's the kind of person who's just pretty self-absorbed and only concerned by money. I think. I
wonder, in general, what would be the reaction to all this if it was like sponsored by, or the money came from Haribo? It's about like
Haribo.
If Haribo just upsets.
Where have you pulled that from? Are they on your desk or something at the moment, Haribo?
No, I was just thinking it's like the least offensive company I could think of. But like, like if all the money came from like, I don't know, selling teddy bears, whether you'd get the same reaction to all this, and whether it's just like a resistance to change rather than, because I seriously feel like a lot of this stuff is just like, it is just like the ultimate. I like my PGA Tour. I like my 72 holes. I just want to stay.
No, I do. Like, yeah, I agree. I totally agree. There's no doubt the PGA Tour is operating solely to protect its monopoly. I think that's the driving point here. Is it's, that they have an absolute monopoly on the upper echelon of the game, and it's, okay, Liv just happened to be in a position where they can fund it through, a means which allows them to compete. At least no one else has got that privilege open to them. Therefore that money attracts a bit of a lot of adverse PR, and probably quite rightly so. But there's no doubt that the PGA Tour's interest to quash Liv comes solely from a standpoint of competition and commanding a market share that they have. That's there's no getting away from it. I mean, it does leave the whole game in a real strange place, though. President's Cup obviously coming up soon. You're looking at, I mean, you could pretty much handicap the international players. You could give them, you could peg them up a couple of shots better to compete. I mean, they're going to be completely and utterly outgunned, aren't they, against the US side? Because now the half
when you
these
take out someone
players,
like Cam Smith and that's
I mean,
hard.
Neiman though as well, whacking Neiman.
Neiman,
really
Answer.
talked about him.
Oosthuizen. These people are that are no longer able to play in that event, which is really the kind of, outside of Europe, and it's an insanely good event. I don't think we really get behind it because we have the Ryder Cup. It's still interesting to watch, but it's not. It's just.
It was great to watch at Royal Melbourne a few years ago. It was great to watch. I think for me, what will be the interesting moment will be as we go into the winter months and the PGA Tour circuit typically quietens down, and actually Liv's schedule is going to be ramping up a little bit, I think, and seeing whether there's any competition for views there, and whether we find ourselves thinking, oh, okay, the Liv Grand Finals coming up in Saudi Arabia, let's flick it on and see who's playing, because the field there is in all likelihood going to be far, far stronger than those guys teeing it up at the DP World Tour finale at Dubai, where is it? The Emirates at Dubai, not the Emirates, sorry, the Jumeirah course at Dubai. I think that's where it could get quite juicy, but because it feels like Liv there is going to have a better product in that moment. But at the moment, the 54-hole shotgun start, when that's put up against the Tour Championship or some of the other top tier PGA Tour events, it just feels a bit of a non-event, the Liv stuff. Really,
I would almost argue that the Tour Championship is as good as I think Liv could ever hope to be, because the Tour Championship was good. It was a great event this year. It's great, Rory going toe to toe with Scotty Scheffler. That was insane. I quite enjoy that event for what it's worth, but there isn't really that much provenance to it. Really, it is an exercise in handing out huge checks to players. So I look at it and think, well, actually, I almost think the best case for Liv is that they could end up with a series of events that are really kind of akin to a Tour Championship,
Yeah, and a lot of the great stories of some, rank outsider making a run and all of a sudden coming tearing through the field and giving someone a run for it. I mean, Tagala was kind of that guy really at the start of the season at the Phoenix, the Waste Management Phoenix, and all of a sudden goes on and has a great PGA Tour career. But at the time, no one really, everyone was like, oh, this is a bit of an unknown. Like, where's he kind of come from? And as you say, if you've got a limited field events, it's hard to see that happening in the same way.
Just while we're talking about Tour Championship, do we feel like the format was somewhat validated this year with, having the handicap system, and someone that wasn't in starting 10 shots ahead has gone on to win it? And I mean, the fact that Rory started triple bogey on his first round and he's already a zillion shots back is actually relatively impressive that he's gone on to do it. But do we feel like the format is somewhat vindicated because
I think it works? Yeah, I think it totally works there, if I'm being brutally honest. The memory of Justin Rose winning the Tour Championship, in fact, didn't win the Tour Championship, Tiger winning the Tour Championship, but then Rose winning that FedEx. Do you remember that? Was almost like such a strange sort of event, or certainly strange sort of victory for Rose, in so much as he didn't win the event but took home the FedEx. That whole thing just feels weird a little bit. So I get it. I get why they do it. They want to have this big season finale. For me, definitely does work. Certainly worked this year. Like, that was amazing. But they never seem to guarantee that. And most of the times I've seen it, it tends to be won at a bit of a march, doesn't it? I think, Cantor and DJ won it quite comfortably, haven't they, in recent memory?
Well, no, actually, the first time though, the first time they gave this format a go, McIlroy won in 2019, the year after. You mentioned there when Justin Rose won the season-long race, but Tiger won the Tour Championship. They debuted it. McIlroy started like 4 under, I think, and then shot, I think 12 under for the 4 days. Ended up, or 13 under for the 4 days. Ended up 17 under total. It's played into his hands again. I mean, it's obviously no great surprise, but I think that kind of format plays really well into McIlroy, because he can just keep going without fear of really holding on to a lead. It's no surprise that both of those occasions, 2019 and this year, he's ended up winning, because he's just kind of been so far back. He's almost like the shackles are off. Then he can just go firing at pins and posting the best numbers he can. Really, it seems like there's no fear.
Yeah, I mean, Scheffler's obviously the best player this season.
I kind of feel like, though, I would enjoy it more. I think it would be treated like a major more if the 30 they got into it, and it's like, you go through the whole season and you go through the postseason and you get to the 30, and instead of it being like a Rose can win if he finishes 5th or better, or this person's handicapped by 10 shots because they did this, I just think if they all just started flat and like, right, 30 guys, you've made it, well done, now go for it, like gloves are off, just fight, and whoever wins, I would be so much more interested. I think if they all start from scratch, everyone had a chance to win, and just go for it.
I get it, but then, where would that leave? I mean, there's a few guys in there, but they've earned enough money in the season, haven't they? They've earned plenty of money in the season. I get why the PGA Tour wants to have it, though. Like, in lieu of having a major of their own or anything, I get why they want to have some sort of crowning moment for the best player of the season. Amazingly, the great thing about this year is that Scottie Scheffler's had, without doubt, the most insane season in the game. Where he's come from at the start of the year to now, what he's picked up on the way, it's truly remarkable. But also, like, you forget just how good a season Rory's had. Like, his performance has been mind-bendingly good this year, almost as good as he's ever played, actually. It just hasn't quite worked in the major championship world. Like, we saw that thing that Justin Thomas put out before, kind of recapping on his year goals at the end of the Tour Championship.
Every year,
and it was really interesting seeing how he had put, just one of his goals was just to, win an event. And it's like, you forget that these guys who are that good in the world, like, that's a realistic goal for them. So, okay, Rory didn't win a major this year, and no doubt he wanted to more than anything else. But there's no getting away from the fact just how bloody good Rory's been this year. And I think sometimes we use the majors as a bit of a benchmark as to whether it's been a success or a fail. But I get it. I know what you mean, Mills. Like, you kind of start them off on level playing field. But I don't know.
Well, on that note, I think it's a nice way to almost come full circle on the topic of this pod, because McIlroy's obviously taken home, $18 million for winning the Tour Championship there. Maybe you're going to correct me and tell me someone did ask him, but the great question in the context of the live discussion we've been having so far is, would he trade that $18 million for a major in 2022? The answer is probably almost certainly yes.
Yeah, I think I can answer on his behalf there, Bruce.
Yeah, he would. That's easy when you got plenty of money.
That is the great irony of the Tour Championship and what the PGA Tour is kind of set out to do, is that, their talisman, they're the best player this season, the generational talent, as you quite rightly point out, Sam. He'd have probably given all of that money up if he could have just had a major to his name.
A few more putts at St Andrews on the Sunday.
Yeah, exactly. Hey ho.
Just quickly, because we've talked about loads of stuff today, but what about shorts?
We're not doing this. We're not playing this game. You're not goading me.
Yeah, I'm
not playing these silly games.
I'm unsure, really.
Just going to leave it there. I'm just going to leave it there. I'm going to put it out there. I'm just going to put it out there. If you like it, take it. If you don't, do what you like with it.
Pair of long socks.
I'm just like, who
wouldn't go
cares?
amiss.
We've already said, we've called in the teams the Crushers, the Niblicks, the Ironheads. It's like, who the hell cares if they're wearing shorts now? The game's gone so far away from where it was. It's like, Jesus.
Yeah, I find it, it's just like pick your battles though, isn't it? It's like, if you really think, for Liv, it's like, yeah, we might as well, because it's just a cheap shot, isn't it, in a way?
Yeah, exactly.
Kind of a fine, fair enough one. It's like, yeah, and you know what? We're also better than PGA Tour because you can wear shorts here. And probably all the players are like, you know what? It's not a game changer for me, actually. The fact that I can't wear shorts on the PGA Tour isn't going to be enough of an incentive to push me over to Liv. But who knows? That's just my take.
But it's only a matter of time before, like, Greg Norman does a focus group with a bunch of random non-golfers, where they're like, how do we get people into the game? And half the focus could come back. We're like, oh, well, Brooks Koepka's pretty jacked. It'd be quite good to see him playing topless. He's like, that's a great idea. We could get him topless to see what happens to the numbers.
That would be good. I would watch that, actually. Pat Perez, less so. Could you imagine Pat Perez playing topless? And on that bombshell, until next time.
Thank you very much for tuning in.
Adios.
Watch this.